Welcome back to Reading Between the Lines with Tan the Man. This is episode number 12. I have with me Brennon Williams. He's the co-founder of Infinity Metaverse. It's great to have you with us, Brennon.
Thanks, Sam. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. Brennon has huge amount of experience. His background speaks for itself. He has been in the industry for a while. And essentially, if you go to his LinkedIn profile, you can definitely see his experience, right? And it speaks for itself. However, Brennon, for the people that don't know you, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Brennon Williams. I've been a software engineer for very close to the last 30 years. So I'm an old grey hair when it comes to that. I've worked around the world, mainly as a consultant engineer, all the way through to becoming a chief technology officer, and mainly holding those sort of levels of roles, as well as a specialty consultant to companies such as Microsoft, Motorola, and many other smaller companies, design agencies, and a whole raft of different types of companies throughout that 30 years, everything from Formula One racing car companies all the way through to construction and engineering companies building the biggest things in the world. That's what I've been doing.
Absolutely. And Brennan, where are you based out of right now?
Well, I was born in Australia, and I left there permanently in 2020 and based myself out of the UK. I since from there lived in several countries, including the US and various parts of Europe. And at the moment, I find myself living in Thailand.
Absolutely. All right. So talk to me about your time at the Army, Brennan, because you've worked with the Army as well, right?
I joined the Army at the age of 17 in Australia, and really that was about getting out of town that I was in. It was a very, very small town that I grew up in. And I was a pretty, I guess, wild and uncontrollable kid that needed some discipline and some direction in life. And I got a pretty crazy set of experiences before I left. Yeah.
All right. And so talk to me about how you ventured into the software world. How did you come across the technology and the software side of things?
So my dad actually had a small business, and even though it was just a small business, he was really into computing. So I think it was about 1980. I was 7 or 8 years old, and he brought home this, ginormous computer. When I look back at it, it was called an Osborne Executive. It's about the same size as a suitcase that you take to the airport, and he could only do certain things on that, spreadsheets with a big thing that sold him on it. And it also came with a copy of F Basic, the precursor, I guess, if you will, to a lot of the basic implementations that were done by Microsoft. So he would give my brother and myself about an hour a night when we weren't fighting, where we could explore and think about things. Of course, it was extremely limited in terms of what we could do, but it was enough to sort of give us an underpinning of logic in terms of programming logic. But it was something that, because of those limitations, I didn't, I didn't really do any further computing for quite a long time after that. Certainly not until after I got out of the Army.
Absolutely. Do you think your experience with the Army has shaped your career within the software industry?
Yeah, I think definitely it has in lots of different ways. In my personal life as well as my professional life. I've been a chronic insomniac my entire life, and instead of I guess instead of going out and partying with everybody, I was, after the army, I had enough discipline and drive to realize that actually there was an opportunity there for me to use that as a gift and to get ahead, to move faster. And quite often the comments that I hear from a lot of people is how can you get so much done? How can you get all of this done? Well, it's mainly because I'm awake, a lot longer than everybody else, and I can focus. Really, I can focus for days at a time, and still be quite functional.
Absolutely. And as we talk about you, it's obvious we can't ignore your company, right? Infinity Metaverse. What is Infinity Metaverse and what are you trying to achieve with it?
Yeah, Infinity Metaverse is it's about infrastructure for us. We haven't explained in great detail to a lot of people yet what it is that we're doing. So, I'm happy to sort of explain that here. For us, it's all about the infrastructure. It's all about understanding, the best parts of the internet up to now, the sort of, the Web 1, Web 2, what they brought us, and learning the lessons of what went wrong, what went so wrong with technology. And I say we because I've been part of this industry for so long. So it's about us creating a new evolution in computing. And, that's a pretty big statement, but the things that we've been working on are they're global in scale. I tend not to work on small things. I tend not to work on small problems. I want very, very big challenges, and this is right up there with one of the biggest challenges. So the company is about how can we provide solutions at a global level when we launch, and how can we do things better than what the industry as a whole has been doing up until now.
Absolutely. Are you launched?
We're not yet. We sort of soft launched a website to be able to speak to people, and that's probably the key part to learning lessons as sort of building startups and doing different things over the years. It's always been one of those key things where my belief is you need to speak to people. You can't just build a solution and here it is, will it work for you? And so, the whole idea of at least letting people know that we're there and giving them some idea what we're doing is in order for us to go out and speak to people across the world. Everything's of a global perspective. So we speak to a lot of businesses, a lot of individuals, and learn and try and understand what it is that they want to see, what it is that is important to them. Again, tying into how can we make all of this work for the best for everybody.
Absolutely. As we look into the Infinity Metaverse, you say that you have nothing to do with crypto blockchain. Why is that?
Yeah, and I clarify this because Dale, one of my co-founders as well, we did a lot of blockchain, a lot of crypto, particularly in London around the property scenes, working with HM Land Registry to look at how things like real estate would be affected by cryptocurrency. So we've done a lot of it, right? When I say we have nothing to do with it, it's a bit of a myth right now that people sort of think that in order to build a metaverse, there needs to be cryptocurrency or there needs to be running on a blockchain. And in actual fact, because of the global nature of the partnerships that we've been putting in place, we need to approach in every way that we can. And for us, until such time as there is strong regulation in the vast majority of the countries that we will be operating in, we're actually not allowed to hold crypto, trade crypto, or run on a blockchain because of the companies that control global finance and some of those companies that we've had to do deals with. Once it is regulated, then absolutely we'll revisit it. But I should add, as per what I previously said, speaking to people and speaking to companies, crypto and blockchain is an exciting space. NFTs there's so many opportunities that will come from these technologies as they mature. We're not there yet. And what we have learned, certainly over the last sort of 18 months of talking to large volumes of people, is that the vast majority of businesses are not ready for crypto. They're not ready to hold crypto on their balance sheets, and they're not certainly clear on how blockchain is going to work for their organizations yet. So again, we're having to work for the vast majority of people and the vast majority of businesses in the decisions that we make and the solutions that we build.
Do you think the FTX collapse has created a market's loss of confidence in the industry?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it definitely does. I guess FTX is, is a poster child for the things that are going wrong in an immature industry. There was plenty of players, and whether it was Terra just before them, and every day there was rug pulls left, right, and center, and things going on, and that is a really interesting part of it. This is what happens in an immature technical state, and I think that a lot of the people around the world that haven't seen that happen from a technical perspective might have been shocked by it, right? Everybody gets told the financial industry is relatively stable, right up into the point where it's not, vis-a-vis 2008 and things like that. And FTX was just the bigger part of it, and it gave such a consumable story to media in general. He was a guy that was trying to do certain things, was touting what seemed to be responsible things left, right, and center, and then, as it appears, possibly not. And the media just lapped that stuff up. So that's why it's getting blown out right now about FTX. It's an easily consumable story for the media. I think in general it will rock bottom the industry. It'll rock bottom the approach to crypto from a consumer level, but more importantly, the venture capital area will not necessarily lose its appetite, but the funds and the limited partners that invest in those funds most likely are finding themselves quite burnt right now. And I would say that we're going to have to wait for a few years now until we have, as we say, strong regulation in place to protect both consumers and other businesses. We're seeing, even just today, BlockFi, I thought 2 weeks ago would go bankrupt. Well, in fact, they've gone bankrupt today. And we will continue to see a number of domino businesses will go bankrupt within the coming months, which most likely could be traced back to FTX, could be traced back to Terra, and even to the actions of companies like Binance, to be honest.
Do you see the contagion of this market's loss of confidence within the crypto industry spreading to Metaverse and Web3?
Well, to a degree, I think so. And primarily that's because of this myth that there's an association between what's largely an experienced, based technology, for consumers and businesses being tied to the requirement of crypto and blockchain. So in some ways, I see that it will have that sort of negative impact, and combine that with, the whole deal with Meta, Facebook. I mean, I tell you, the interesting fact there is that it wouldn't matter, really would not matter what Meta did right now. If Meta had, this amazing experience, the general media will find a way to tear them down. And I'm not saying that's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a completely toxic business and a completely toxic, CEO that's running it. Not that I know him personally at all, but it's all self-inflicted, right? It's a self-inflicted wound, and it will drag this industry down for a little bit until there's a change, and until there's a change, whether that's Mark Zuckerberg resigning, if the rumors are right, if he does that. No one's forgotten about the dirty stuff that Facebook did, right? So it's going to take a little while. It's going to take a while for everything to calm itself down as well.
Right.
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.
That actually brings me to my next question. Are you Infinity Metaverse? Are you an open or closed metaverse?
We say that we are an open metaverse network, and it's challenging for me to describe the sort of delineation between certain types of technologies, because we're also looking at scenarios around operating systems and possibly hardware and things like that as well. But from a network perspective and the core idea of a metaverse, we like to say we're open. And the reason why we say that is because our system's being designed and architected entirely from the ground up in a completely different way, but still with this mechanism of respecting the fact that people should have choices. People should be able to go out and build metaverse experiences with different engines, different platforms, and most likely, in some cases, there will be much better experiences on different platforms and different engines. And so we needed a way to say, this is about the consumer, this is about the users, and saying this can't be a walled garden. You have to enable people to be able to jump from world to world to world, regardless of whether that world is created and hosted on Infinity Metaverse or created and hosted somewhere else. The interoperability has to be there for it to work. The internet as it stands right now would never have worked under the plans of AOL and Microsoft as well. In the early days, they wanted to charge everybody just to be able to use things like hyperlinks. It just would never have worked. And so that's one of those learnings we need to take and say, it's about consumers being able to make choices for themselves, and they shouldn't be locked out of any experience.
Absolutely. As the co-founder of Infinity Metaverse, are you a centralized or a decentralized metaverse?
Well, again, there's some interesting areas there. I'd say in a lot of the areas we are 100% centralized, and for a very good reason. There are areas, though, that we are looking at where we're trying to identify the best areas that are a great candidate for decentralization. One of the best examples of that is that in order to make this metaverse work, the infrastructure as we've been designing and creating it, we've had to develop an entirely new protocol. So everybody's heard of HTTP as the protocol that the internet runs on, and we've developed a brand new protocol that sits on top of that. Now, for us, there's a real interest in how can we take that protocol when it's stable, when it reaches a certain point of maturity, and push it into an organization like a DAO, for example, where there is a community that get to collectively decide how that protocol works moving forward. I should be really clear on that, though, that seeing some of the experiences of DAOs, what we do not believe in is the execution function of a DAO. That is where all the errors and the issues happen. So some people say it's a hybrid DAO, hybrid centralized, decentralized model, either way. for us, it's neither important here nor there, whether something is centralized or decentralized. It's whether it is appropriately centralized or decentralized. And where ultimately we have to answer to the people that use the technology. Just squirreled away and to the side.
So what you're saying is, instead of having a decentralized system, you would rather have a democratized system where the people that are adding value to the community, to your metaverse, should have a say. And you would be centralized, but you would let the decision making be done in a democratic way.
Yeah, absolutely. There's and as I say, there are sort of several areas that we are really interested in what will work in a decentralized place, a centralized, more centralized way. When you look at it, it is a democratization of technology as a whole. What I can say is that in order to achieve the technical solutions that we've done to be able to do things like persistence and interoperability and things like that, technically they can't run on a decentralized system. Certainly not anytime soon. So, even at the core of it, the execution of the code needs to run on a centralized solution.
Absolutely. A lot of the experts within the Metaverse and Web3 industry compare Metaverse land to domain name URLs. What domain name URLs are Web2? Often people and experts say the Metaverse land, and we can debate which metaverse will be the more popular one, but metaverse land as a technology would be the domain name URL of Web3. Do you agree with that? And if not, why not?
No, yeah, I don't agree with it at all, to be honest. And I'll be really clear there. I think it's a bit of a sort of a fake gold rush, if you will. And in fact, what we say is, why buy land when you can own the world, right? The point being is that we don't believe that people should have to pay for a virtualized space in order to possibly rent that out as a sub-rent with some sort of level of constraint. The really interesting part around that is that most companies that are selling metaverse land are doing so and saying, here's an NFT of your land. And it's like, okay, but you do realize you can't take that land anywhere. You can't take it off one platform and stick it somewhere else, right? So it's already goes against the sort of the concepts of metaverse and true ownership of objects and assets inside the metaverse is portability and interoperability. So we don't agree with land. We strongly advise people to be really think about that when solutions like ours will allow people to create and build metaverse experiences as they want to, completely free of charge.
So as you say that you can't take that metaverse land anywhere, right? And obviously you touched on interoperability. Then would your advice to developers and founders and entrepreneurs be to sort of inculcate that into their metaverses? So would you then tell them that that is something they should work on, and that will give the land certain utility that would help them?
Can you ask me that again?
Right. I'll explain it off camera, but then you can straight away answer. So basically, I'm asking whether you would advise them, because you said that you can't take that land to another platform, right? So the question is, would you then advise them to build that utility where you can take it to another platform and use it somehow using interoperability? And so the question that I'm asking is, would you then advise developers and entrepreneurs and founders to sort of use that as something to add to the utility of that land? And you can just take a break and then you can answer. So
Yeah, I guess the challenge is that the assets that are being created for 3D space, even the assets themselves have different formats and different properties, depending on the platform that it's built on, right? And so if you consider land as being an asset, then it should be portable, right? But it's not, because land in this particular context is a singular space on a platform, and it's not transportable at all. But the assets that you put on it certainly could be. And we've spoken to a number of companies that they wanted to prototype and just test the metaverse and sort of see and figure it out. And so they rented some land in in certain metaverse spaces to basically do some user experience testing. Now, that's not to say that all of their work has gone to waste, because certainly it is our intention to enable folks to bring those 3D assets and make them work in such a way that makes them portable across the entire sort of metaverse space. So asset creation itself now, regardless of the format that you're using, certainly has value, and it'll only increase in value. It's when you need to put functionality into those assets that things start to get a little bit more tricky. But again, functionality is what will also additionally add value to assets as well. So advice, I guess my advice is to just be very broad-minded about some of these concepts, and the fact that the asset creation is really what it's all about, the content itself, and the spaces and what it enables people to do within it, regardless of where the land is. It's the experience and the content that the users will get, which really is the value.
absolutely. Do you see metaverses such as Upland or Sandbox or Decentraland developing into what your Facebooks and Instagram and WhatsApps have developed for Web2?
I guess the challenge for them is they were so early, and certainly in the cases of areas like Sandbox, have been around for a very long time as a platform, but they were so early and in such a rush to bolt things on to try and fit the narrative of what the metaverse is, that in a lot of ways they're almost stuck with what they have. And I think that we see, consumers generally are becoming more and more technically competent as the years go by. And I say that from such a place that I remember, in the 90s, a huge number of people had no idea what the internet was. They really didn't know how to use a computer. And even most middle-aged people were scared to use a computer. And so what we've seen is an acceleration over time from there, where we start to get large numbers of people becoming more and more technically competent. And as a result of that, what we're seeing is that people are willing to switch things quicker. They're willing to try other things. And so, to some degree, I think the heyday of the super platforms may just have come, and we might be even seeing that in real time with Twitter right now, with enough people, certainly thinking about trying something else. I think, if those other platforms, your Sandboxes, Decentraland, can figure out a way of playing nicely with everybody else, then they are showing value to a metaverse as a whole. And again, we can look at today's internet and see that there are certainly some sites, that you have to be a member of. You have to be you have to be in some sort of special club to get access to them. And that's a double-edged sword. It can work two ways. I think from our perspective, when people figure out how to play nicely with others, then better things happen. That's the way we look at it.
Absolutely.
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.
And it's great that you talked about the technical knowledge of the people, because when it comes to building, say, a metaverse or a metaverse experience, something that you're trying to do is sort of simplified for people. So my question to you is, are you a low-code platform, or are you a no-code platform? And is it a drag and drop builder?
Yeah, it's a great question, Tam. For the technical people, developers and designers, I'll come back to the no-code part in a little minute, and perhaps you'll see why. In speaking to lots of designers and developers around the world, there's a huge number of web developers, app developers, and things like that. What we do know is, and I can tell you from my own personal experience as a developer in game engines and 3D games, that it's a much more complex problem to be able to develop code for 3D. The maths is a sort of orders of magnitude more complex when we start dealing with 3D maths, right? And so we know that even designers and developers are afraid of the metaverse in such a way because they just will not learn to that level of coding. And so when we think about, even from people that are from a development perspective, in a largely very technical people building websites and apps, as I said, if they have an aversion to it, then the everyday person that isn't technical at all really has no hope of building a metaverse experience on, let's say, a game engine platform, for example. So one of the drivers for us was to figure out, as part of that architecture, how to create solutions that were 100% no code, enabling people to drag and drop, pull content in from libraries or templates, build metaverse experiences, deploy them with a single click, and deploy them globally, and invite as many people as they wanted to come in and just start sharing that experience. That's the actual the driver of that experience. We will eventually enable certain modes where some people will be able to write code against it, right? But certainly that's down the track, and initially it's a full no-code environment with a drag and drop interface. So anybody from the age of 7 to 70 can build and deploy a metaverse globally in under 3 minutes. That's our goals.
Do I need to know how to design the metaverse, or do you design it for me as well?
It's a really good question, and it depends on what you consider to be design as well. So generally speaking, we will have a number of types of world spaces that people can design on. So an example is, one world space you may want to be, on a desert island, for example. And so there's certain functionality that'll be available in that sort of experience, versus, let's say, something that's outer space, where there's lower gravity or things like that. Okay. In terms of the experience itself, this is the really interesting part. We saw when the mobile phone started transitioning from being a dumb phone to a smartphone, what we saw was that, designers and companies had to learn how to make software and experiences for these devices. They had to figure out that You couldn't just take a website and squash it down onto a small screen. It didn't work. And we're going to see that same level of challenge for anybody that wants to build a metaverse, is to say, okay, you're used to building a website, for example, which is a page and people read through it or navigate by clicking on buttons. And now you've got this social space where huge numbers of people can go and talk to each other as they're experiencing things at the same time. Things are live. So, you know, the design of the experience is going to take time, but out of the box, enabling people to have social experiences from the very start is already in itself a pretty compelling experience, right? It's then about the nuances of certain parts of that experience that you can finesse. And the example I'd use with that is like a shopping mall. For example, you go to a big shopping mall today and you turn one corner and there's a food hall. You turn another corner and there's a technical zone. You turn another corner, it's all about baby wear. And, you know, there's that sort of approach to different experiences that can, you know, please different people. So it's going to take time for people to prototype. It's going to take time for people to learn how to design experiences, social experiences in the metaverse.
Absolutely. Right. Let me ask you this question then. Are you venture backed, Brennan?
Not yet, Tim. Not we literally have just started that that journey in the last 2 weeks.
Absolutely. And so since you answered that, let me then bring this question to you. And can you draw some parallels between the dot-com bubble and now, and then your experiences in fundraising from dot-com bubble to today, and how are you going in terms of your strategy there? So
Oh, it's a great question. And there is definitely the parallel of the dot-com bubble to today. Parallels there are, you know, they're pretty standard. Right at the dot-com bubble, there was massive amounts of money being thrown at people for just the craziest ideas, right? It was just a gold mine for scammers. And yeah, absolutely, there's strong parallels between the dot-com bubble and what we're seeing happen today. And you know, the first thing to recognize is that back in those times, the dot-com bubble scenarios was the same thing that's just been happening. There's huge amounts of money being thrown at people, right, to come up with the craziest of ideas. What we saw was that the vast majority of businesses that failed from the dot-com bubble were businesses that weren't technically led. That means that people could come up with these fantastical ideas, make up a business model that they thought, yeah, that makes sense. If you've got 1 million people looking at something, they'll buy it. And they had no way to execute. They had no way to actually build what they said they were going to build. And the money very quickly evaporated as soon as people realized there was no chance of a revenue stream coming in, you know, to actually back up the claims. What we've just seen, especially earlier on this year in the venture world, is much the same thing. We've seen venture capital go to absolute nuts, stupid levels. You know, one of the very basic metrics of venture is to look at what we call revenue, right? It's a revenue multiple to give a valuation of a company. And generally speaking, you know, if you look at a company's revenue and you, okay, let's say 30 times revenue was a sort of standard for a SaaS-based business, right? A software as a service type business. Well, even sort of several months ago, we saw venture capitalists starting to do 500 times revenue and 1,000 times revenue. You know, we saw companies that had revenue of, you know, $10 million and trying to raise, you know, 15, 20, $30 billion. on $10 million revenues. It's like, what? So it's inevitable that this is going to happen. It's inevitable that you get into these areas of mass amounts of overfunding. You get into these areas where the prevailing sort of wisdom is that growth at all costs is, what gets you, what gets the VC the earliest exit and the earliest return is if they can grow quick enough and become a public company and enable everybody to trade out. The reality is that the businesses that made it through the dot-com bubble and the businesses that will get through it today are the businesses that can actually generate revenue, and not just revenue, but generate revenue without staggering losses. They can generate profit. They can generate value and growth and profit all at the same time. The sorts of things everybody at business school is sort of meant to be taught in the first place. I think VCs have been playing their own little game, doubling up on money and throwing money between funds. Let's be really clear here. VCs get paid when they give the money out. Right, they make fees that way, and so it's in their best interest to just throw money at people right up until the point in time where their funds dry up, and we're starting to see that more and more. So there certainly is a lot of parallels right now, and yeah, for any business, it's just a shame that so many of them are cutting staff. They're cutting staff. It's not just the biggest companies in the world doing this. It's a lot of startups that are cutting a lot of staff because they were funded and promised that they would have more money to keep growing, just keep hiring people. Well, unfortunately, there's always people. There's always individuals that are the ones on the receiving end of the bad side of that advice. And that's exactly where we are right now.
Absolutely. So as we're looking at Infinity Metaverse, let me ask you this question. How do you plan to make money?
It's a very simple business model, when you really think about it, right? Much the same way as the internet today, people can open up a browser and they can go and consume content, knowledge, all of those things, and they can do it largely for free, unless it's a paid membership site, right? But they can browse, you can learn, and that's, again, one of the best parts of Web2, right, at scale. So all of the experiences that a consumer will have, the browser, which is actually a gateway, the tools themselves to enable people to develop, all of that is free of charge, right? Where it becomes monetized is through a subscription service. When you deploy your experience, you deploy it globally with Infinity Metaverse. It's not, you don't pick a server in, let's say, America and deploy it to that server in America. You're deploying it to a global infrastructure. And so our subscriptions are based very similar to mobile phone contracts, based on streaming data costs, but exceptionally low. I won't give you a figure right now, but what I will say is, anybody that wants to create a solution and deploy it for a large number of people will be able to do it, probably even cheaper than hosting today.
Absolutely. So, Brennan, let me ask you this question. Essentially, you are giving away 4 domain names for free, right? What's that all about? And can you just talk about them, please?
Yeah, so in creating a new protocol enabled us to really look at the way that domains work, and to some degree the sort of the structure of the existing domains they're not functionally descriptive. Okay, so we've so far released 4 domains which are characterized as the .link is a personal domain. And then you have a .jump, which is a main commercial domain, a .twin, and a .fan. So the idea being there is jump is about jumping because with Infinity Metaverse, you can jump between worlds and different experiences. So, that's sort of any business that you could think of would start off with a .jump. A .twin is directly for companies that want to create digital twin. For example, want to show a building before they actually build it, but allow people to see inside of that building. Or it could be manufacturing plants that want to have a consistent common global interface to manage their facilities. Okay. The .fan is very, very specifically around creators, and think of it as anyone that's sort of, for example, when we sort of, it was around the thought of, say, for example, a YouTube creator, and how can they interact more personally and more intimately. Okay, so the .fan domain, as we were building that, was really about trying to understand the challenges that creators have today in building more personalized, intimate experiences for their fan base, as well, not just in terms of how content is consumed, but also how creators can be rewarded and monetized for their efforts. And we just think there's a lot of there's better things that can be done to help creators monetize their content and develop things for their fan base as well.
Absolutely.
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.
So as we're talking about creators, right? And a lot of our viewers are creators, a lot of the community members are creators. Obviously, their question listening to this interview and to you would be, as a creator, how can I make money using your platform?
So there is some specific examples that we are looking to build out. And again, we're sort of trying to tread a fine line between creating a platform that dictates how experiences are versus just creating the facility for people to create that experience themselves. So one thing we've had a couple of different ideas, different concepts sort of floating about. From an influencer sort of position, say, someone who has a lot of fans. Let's, for example, say just randomly, let's say a pro football player, right? Because it's World Cup at the moment, yeah. A space where that footballer could bring their fans in and meet with them within that space, in that social space. Possibly, I mean, most footballers have, crazy sports cars and different clothing brands. They've got all of that together. And so they can probably build experiences there in collaboration with their sponsors to engage with their fans, let them drive their car, let them try on their clothes or things like that. Okay, so another example is in, let's say, in the field of, video content creation, and there's a number of platforms you can do that on. And in particular, there's a couple of areas there. One is around things like revenue share in advertising models. We think are completely, they're almost criminally low what percentage the creator gets these days. And then we look at other platforms where the content creator will have a fan base that's trying to support them, through some of these other monetization platforms. But the creator is losing, in some cases, 15 and 20% of their fans' funding, for that platform. And so we just think that that's wrong. A lot of these areas we are looking to change and improve and bring, not for us to make money. I mean, straight up, we would be looking to create a solution whereby, fans could contribute as part of a sort of fan scenario or a sponsorship scenario where the creator gets 100% of that money for the effort and reward that they've done. That goes at the heart of what we believe in. So the idea here is that, again, we will have a significant global infrastructure on launch, and certainly one where we will be able to provide similar solutions to what is out there in the marketplace today for content creators.
Absolutely. All right, Brennan, let's move on to the rapid fire questions. And I'd love to hear your opinion on these questions. When you're looking at the future of Metaverse and Web3, who do you think wins that race? Is it big tech, or is it companies or platforms like Sandbox or Upland? And why do you think that?
Okay, so I think if we look at every great sort of technical space that's occurred certainly since the mid-90s, you know, whether it's been sort of the operating system wars, whether it was then the browser wars, whether it was, you know, then sort of moved into the e-com scenarios, then to the, you know, even today in terms of social media wars. Really, at some point, you see a new incumbent rises and rises much faster. And realistically, the reason this happens is because the existing big incumbents have to protect their existing business. Their tolerance for risk really goes down, and their shareholders don't want them to cannibalize their existing business by trying new things, which is why we see a lot of very, very large tech businesses with huge stockpiles of money and almost being regulated not to be able to spend it. So I think it'll be a new incumbent that dominates the metaverse scenario. I think there's a couple of different areas. I think there is you know, there's an opportunity for new types of media companies. There's opportunities for new types of content creation and companies individually to get bigger. Of course, you know, we're not playing for fun here. The size of the agreements that we've been doing, as I said, globally, we fully intend to become the largest incumbent in terms of infrastructure and, you know, do the right thing for once. That's what we've been trying to do.
Absolutely. Per your experience and your opinion, and I'm relying more on the experience which will shape your opinion, what will trigger the mass adoption of Metaverse?
So at the moment, I personally have the mass adoption date as pretty close to the end of 2024. And there's a number of factors that go into analyzing and thinking about dates, and that can be do with things like the financial state of different markets around the world. There's technology readiness levels that we look at, and there's also this sort of state of mind of people in general. And so we have to see a snowball effect of certain things occur for mass adoption to happen. And yeah, I mean, we could chat for another 2 hours purely about mass adoption windows and how someone like me analyzes it and typically gives that to a much larger business, but in this case, analyze it for our own purposes. But end of 24, close to 25 is when I believe mass adoption will start for the metaverse.
Okay, so I'm gonna just give you a prompt off camera. Do you mind just running us through those few things? Don't need to go massively into detail, but what makes your conviction of end of 2020? You said there are factors, right? Just if you could name a few factors, so you know, because that is something that a lot of us want to know. What will trigger the mass adoption of metaverse? So I'll just ask you a question, and then you can go from there. So Brennan, briefly speaking, would you touch upon a few of these factors that will trigger the mass adoption, as you say?
Yeah, sure. I think, well, one of those areas is the financial industry. Okay. And you know, if you look at the heart of what the internet really is, we describe it as it's basically a giant marketplace. That's not to say that every transaction is a monetary based transaction. It says that there is a transaction, whether that's a consumer that's learning something, there's a transaction there, right? There's a transaction of data. And so looking at the financial mechanisms around the world, looking at the sort of trajectory of central towards you know, innovations in currency, but also looking at regulations and things like that. It really looks at when can a marketplace be So a large number of people can actually start to trade in a metaverse. And, if you look at it right now, the vast majority of experiences in metaverse platforms are things like events and showcases, and there's just a lot of games, right? But at the end of the day, business is about being able to transact, sell products. Consumers want to be able to buy products. And, again, this is one of the reasons why we have a payment provider, payment solution globally built directly into the protocol layer of the metaverse.
So let me extrapolate on that, Brennan, and ask you, what brings e-commerce to metaverse? Since you say trading is very important to metaverse, right? So what brings e-commerce to metaverse?
Well, the benefit of being this old guy that has this, experience for all of this stuff is that I got to see over time how the whole sort of e-commerce part of technology developed, and what created mass adoption in that particular scenario. Well, it was about solutions coming so any business could create a store, but it was also payment providers, and it was the ease of being able to transact. One of my very earliest startups, way back in sort of 96 timeframe, I think it was. It's funny enough, I had this idea of enabling people to be able to buy things on the internet without a credit card. Yeah, some things happened with that, but lo and behold, PayPal came out the back end of another sort of competing group, shall we say. But it's, how can you make it so simple that everybody can sell things, and how can you make it so simple that everybody can buy things? Previously you wanted to sell stuff, you had to create a merchant account, you had to go and have this type of account, you had to pay these fees, you had to have this type of insurance depending on the country you're in, and then let's not even start talking about currencies. And when all of that becomes simplified, that's when you started to see the mass adoption of e-commerce, online trading, really start to take hold. And then, of course, companies like Amazon, for example, just amplified that with things like one-click payments and stuff like that. So, that particular area, putting aside the crypto sort of side of things, because that's certainly the biggest problem that crypto has, is usability and user experience. Generally speaking, if you can enable anybody to create a business, and trade those goods and services for real fiat money, and do it so it's so simple on both sides of that transaction, that's when you can get adoption occurring from an e-commerce perspective in the metaverse.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this question, Brennan. One of your co-founders is in England, and another of your co-founders is in Lithuania, right? So as you're building a metaverse, do you see GDPR as a threat to metaverse?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess that's an interesting thing that people outside of Europe as a whole that probably or might not think that GDPR would apply to them. Of course, GDPR isn't the only standard. Globally, there's several very large privacy standards now, and of course, the UK is thinking about making its own again. And all of these standards will affect the interaction of people within a metaverse experience. It's going to be interesting to see how these data, protection and privacy scenarios adopt to work within the metaverse when we're talking about much more social spaces and places that have very large groups of people that could be having multiple conversations about different contexts. Right now, things like GDPR they're painful, but they're relatively simple to deal with in a technical sense. As long as if you're tracking cookies, you've got to tell people you're tracking cookies. You've got to give them a way to opt out of it. That's pretty simple because it's a it's a singular one-on-one interaction between a website and a user. But a metaverse is multiple users in a very, very widely distributed space, and the laws and rules around things like GDPR are going to be very difficult for metaverse experience creators to manage themselves. Because that's the other thing, is what we're saying. We create the infrastructure much like a telephone company. We don't control what you can build in there or how you're going to manage those spaces. So people are really going to have to think about it.
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.
So let me ask you this question and extrapolate on your answer. Do you think most metaverses currently are in violation of GDPR? And if yes, do you think the European Union is behind the curve?
I would say that's it's very tricky to answer. And admittedly, I would think that some undoubtedly are. I think it's going to be seriously challenging for people to work out rules around cross-border data transfers, things like that. Where is data sovereignty lie, and all of those sorts of areas. And this is actually a really it's something we were talking about not so long ago as well, right? So let's think about GDPR for a minute here and say, if we've got some data that is sat, let's say, in the UK, in a hospital that is related to a European patient, the NHS in the UK needs to tell that patient about their data rights. It also needs to find a way to provide that data back to the European Union, back to the country of the citizen, country of origin. Now, that's okay if that's very, very straightforward. So GDPR is this complex beast. But even in that sense, it's pretty simple, right? One's data is here, they live there, that data has to go there. Now, the real challenge is that the new architecture, this new infrastructure, global, all at the same time. There is no server in one country. There is no sovereignty of the data. It is instantaneous. What do we do with data protection at that point? For who and how does that work? It's going to be very, very challenging. I think again, this is an area that individuals are really going to have to be mindful of as we move forward, and hopefully work with their countries, work with with politicians to make sensible rules around all of these things.
So let me sort of ask this thought-provoking question. If this goes to an extreme, right? Do you see metaverses excluding European citizens and not allowing them to interact with non-European citizens? Because I'm presuming if two people are interacting within a metaverse, one is a European citizen, the other is, let's say, somewhere from Asia or Latin America or Africa, and essentially the data is being stored on both the European servers and the non-European servers, then that, from European standards, would be a violation for them. So as a platform, your obvious answer is, okay, I'm just going to ban the European users and not allow them to use my service, because how do you comply with it? So from that perspective, do you see Europe and European metaverse ecosystem suffering because of this?
Well, again, I think this is the increase in the the good parts of the protocol that I talked about before. For example, we have age rating built directly into the protocol, and along with that, we also have the ability for people to be able to put in opt-in, opt-out scenarios based on geographic location, right? Because a metaverse experience that runs on Infinity. Metaverse is theoretically running globally. In order to give it a home, to give it a an area of law to be regulatory controlled, our scenario is that whoever creates that experience, the country of origin, their citizenship of where they are, actually dictates the laws in which their experience should follow. Now, again, we don't enforce that because we're just providing the infrastructure and the technology. But there's certainly going to be scenarios there, which is why we put it in the protocol, where exactly that. Some solution providers that are their sovereign origin is in Europe are going to want to block someone else. And then we have these scenarios around things like sanctions and all of those sorts of things that we have to manage as well, that are on our side. So in terms of payments directly within the protocols, managing sanctions and sort of KYC regulation globally in that sense. So there's a lot that's going to transpire over time. The biggest question, and the one that you rightfully raised, is the fact that everything is built on this idea of data sovereignty. Right now, GDPR, the Californian, Data Protection Act, the UK one that they're trying to build, and Canadian one, I think, is already happening as well. They're all working on this idea that your data is in one server in one country. And my question is, what happens when it's not? When it actually isn't on one server? It's just globally. What do you do then? All of your ideals actually fall apart. You have to come up with a new set of rules. And so who knows, maybe we can make them think completely differently and figure out the good parts and replace the bad parts with something new again.
Do you then see your data not being on any server and being, if I can just pull it out of an idea, do you see your data being tokenized and essentially existing where someone needs to access it, they have the access, but then essentially you own it and you can take it across different maybe blockchains or across different ecosystems and to validate it if it needs validation, but essentially you own the private keys to that, similar to how you currently own a private keys to your crypto wallet or whatever. So do you see that happening in the future where it's not stored anywhere, it's stored wherever you want it to be stored and you essentially own your data?
Yeah, so, and we have a couple of different models around this. So one of these things, again, is with interoperability, and it's saying that there are a large number of companies now trying to work on identity management in the blockchain space, and that's great. It's a prime candidate for blockchain usage. Our own solution enables the user to maintain the sovereignty of their data. And that is by that data being directly under their control. So, for example, if a user navigates to a world space and they want to purchase something, when they go to purchase something, the only data that the world space sees is a unique identifier for that user. It sees nothing else. And it has to trigger through the protocol a message that actually comes back to the user to say, you're going to buy this thing, right? So this becomes a disconnected purchase chain, which is taking a long time to architect this in such a way. Right now on the internet, you're there, a website is there, your data is switched between the two of you. And this is the most insecure way to transfer data when it's respective of money and it's respective of payments. So we wanted to stop that. So that's what we.
So let me ask you this question. Do you think election campaigns are going to be happening in the metaverse anytime soon?
I'm going to say no, right? And that's not because I don't believe that they can or believe that they should. I'm just going to say no because it's one of the mind-blowingly stupid lack of use of technology I've ever seen. You know, we really have had the ability to hold. I don't think that voting will happen in the metaverse, and not for a very long time. There's a good reason for that, right? We look back and we have technically really had the ability for almost the last 2 decades to actually do voting and, to sort of do things, computationally to affect a voting mechanism. And there's very few countries in the world that have tried it in earnest, right? There's a lot of people in power that they don't like the idea of it, right? Will we get there? We probably will one day. Will it be on a blockchain? Well, it's a pretty good use case for certainly for a contract or a record that can't be changed. But then again, we look back at some of the issues around Facebook and some of the things around the US elections and indeed the Brexit scenarios in the UK, and how much did technology influence the outcomes of these elections. And I think if anything, the powers that be will try their best to keep the two separated. They want their democratic processes to be run pencil and paper for as long as they can, versus technically being implemented. That's just my own feeling. I just don't believe there's a comfort level there, and certainly not where we see everybody getting, having their money ripped off them every single day from rug pulls and stuff like that. I don't think we're going to see it anytime soon.
Absolutely. We can go on for hours and hours, and I think I'd love to have you back another time, but I think you have another engagement as well, Brennon. So that essentially brings us to the end of episode 12 of Reading Between the Lines with Tandaman, with Brennon Williams of Infinity Metaverse. So with that, thank you, Brennon. Thank you for joining us today. It was a pleasure talking to you and hearing your opinions and learning about Infinity Metaverse.
Thanks so much, Tom. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Before we end this, I would just end it with the same quote I say as always. You be the arbiter of truth, the viewers of the Metaverse Street Journal. Thank you very much. This was episode 12. Thank you, Brennon.
Thanks, Tom.
If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you think what's being discussed is nice and you'd like to join the discussion, please comment below. And if you'd like to stay updated, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon. Thank you.